Game of Thrones Season 2 is a faithful adaptation of the second book in A Song of Ice and Fire, but with a few major changes that got book readers pretty annoyed. Let me know in the comments what you think about these differences, help the channel grow by subscribing, and strap in because here are the top 10 changes from A Clash of Kings to Game of Thrones Season 2. When you think Cersei and Littlefinger, you're either one of those sick individuals whose mind goes to Euron Greyjoy's proposition in Season 7, or an OG who remembers this famous scene from Season 2.
I heard a song once about a boy of modest means found his way into the home of a very prominent family.
When boys and girls live in the same home, awkward situations can arise. Even brothers and sisters develop certain affections. And when those affections become common knowledge, that is an awkward situation. Indeed.
Of course, Cersei and Littlefinger don't have any isolated scenes like this in the book, so this invented scene is another testament to the show's ability to not only do the story justice, but improve on it too.
Knowledge is power.
Seize him. Cut his throat. Stop. Wait. I've changed my mind. Let him go. Power is power.
Daenerys' journey through the Red Waste is a bit different in the book. In her first chapter, before sending her riders out to look for civilization, the scrawny Khalasar comes across a pale, dead city with crumbling walls. The city looks beautiful from afar, but once they get closer, they see that the place is long abandoned, with devil grass growing between the paving stones.
Mud is all other grass. The Dothraki believe that one day it'll cover everything. That's the way the world will end.
The city is desolate and void of any color, with bleached, broken skulls littering the streets, and so they name the city Vaes Tolorro, the City of Bones. There are, however, wells full of water and fruit trees off of which they can survive. Daenerys reflects on how nice it would be to revive this place and settle there. Tempting as it is, she summons her blood riders Aggo, Rakaro, and Jogo to ride out and find their next destination. While the book sees them all return with different tales, including one of an immense dragon skeleton, the show made the macabre change to have Rakaro finding trouble on the road and his remains sent back on his horse.
Who did this?
Calpono, perhaps?
Now, this is a phenomenal upgrade on the book, because here, Ygritte gives us another beautiful glimpse into Dothraki culture. When Jogo returns to Vaes Tolorro, he's not alone. Pyat Pri, Xaro, and Doxos, and Quaithe from Qarth are with him, all dying for a glimpse of those dragons. In the show, Vaes Tolorro is conceptually replaced by the surroundings of Qarth being called the Garden of Bones, which is not a thing in the book.
The Garden of Bones. Every time the Qarthians shut their gates on a traveler, the garden grows.
And the whole thing about Daenerys potentially being rejected at the gates is added for dramatic effect, whereas in the book, Pyat Pri, Xaro, and Quaithe escort her into the city without drama. In the show, Daenerys' dragons are stolen, brought to the House of the Undying, and she goes to rescue them. But in the book, the dragons remain unstolen, and Dany, accompanied by only Drogon, goes to the House of the Undying to seek the advice of the so-called Undying Ones. Khaleesi! The place is filled with cryptic visions, including those of the Iron Throne and Drogo with their unborn child as depicted in the show. The first vision not to feature in the show is a beautiful naked woman sprawling on the floor with 4 little men with rat-like faces raping her. This could symbolize the War of the Five Kings ravaging the country of Westeros, but why 4 little men when there are 5 kings? Perhaps author George Martin is saying that one of those kings was actually a good one.
Would have been a true king, a good king.
The next visions include one of the Red Wedding, the house with the red door in Braavos, Dany's only fond childhood memory, the Mad King saying, "Let him be king of the ashes." Burn them all! And her brother Rhaegar with his wife and son, who he says is the prince that was promised. Rhaegar also cryptically adds that there must be one more, and that the dragon has 3 heads, which could indicate that Jon and Daenerys must work together to save the world, potentially with a third person, maybe Bran.
You'll never walk again, but you will fly.
Then, a vision of a great hall with the most beautiful music Dany has ever heard, and people claiming to be the Undying Ones, promising her knowledge and pleasures. Empty promises, just like Xaro's vault in the show. Finally, Daenerys comes upon a room full of figures that are no more than shadows. Over them floats a blue, corrupted human heart. Turns out they are the real Undying Ones, and their voices appear inside Dany's head, confusing, tormenting, and trying to consume her. She gets a flurry of visions, including her son Rhaego had he lived, the deaths of her brothers Rhaegar and Viserys, a blue-eyed king with a red sword in his hand who casts no shadow, a blue flower growing from a chink in a wall of ice, 10,000 slaves crying mother as Daenerys rides by, and more. All this until Drogon tears up the floating heart, killing the Undying Ones and saving the day. Every good season of Game of Thrones contained a climax in episode 9. In season 2, this was the Battle of the Blackwater, where Stannis invades King's Landing and his fleet gets torched by wildfire. Leading up to the battle, however, the book not only sees Tyrion put in an order for all the wildfire ever, but also commands every blacksmith in King's Landing to start building a massive chain. The purpose of this chain is to stretch it across the mouth of the Blackwater River, so that when Stannis' fleet crosses, they can race it to split the enemy armada in two, cutting off both retreats and support. Once nicely trapped and divided, the wildfire is unleashed and a demoralizing chaos spreads amongst the enemy. The wildfire is, of course, the big bamboozle of this event, and a large chunk of the budget must have already gone to the special effects of that alone. So it's understandable that the enormous chain never featured in the show. Oh yeah, unless you count that. In addition to the chain, Tyrion has to deal with internal threats, like the group of treacherous merchants and nobles secretly supporting Stannis called the Antler Men. When their plot to open the gates of King's Landing to let the enemy in is discovered, they are hanged with antlers nailed to their heads. Their bodies are then flung at the invading forces using catapults. Imagine that. Lastly, when Tyrion is attacked by Sir Mandon of the Kingsguard, he not only gets a cut across the face, but his entire nose is taken off as well, making his appearance in the book and the show even more different. Book Tyrion has one green eye and one black eye, his legs are bowed and uneven, and he's often described as grotesque. George R. R. Martin has commented on this many times, suggesting that Peter Dinklage is almost too handsome to play Tyrion. In the show, Quaithe, the mysterious Shadowbinder from Ashai, appears only briefly to warn Daenerys about those who would steal her dragons.
They shall come day and night to see the wonder born into the world again, and when they see, they shall lust.
But in the books, Quaithe frequently appears to Daenerys in visions, offering cryptic advice and prophecies like, "To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back, and to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow." But who is Quaithe, and what does she want? The show totally abandons her involvement, and with the book still inconclusive, all we have is speculation. Many believe that she is Sheera Seastar, a Targaryen bastard born over 100 years prior. Perhaps she is sustained by a similar magic as Melissandre, or perhaps the magic of the three-eyed raven, who, of course, used to be her lover back in the days. Being a Targaryen, and with her ex up north prepping Bran to save the world, makes sense for her to be an ally of the living. Perhaps the biggest omission from the books is the Kettleblack brothers, Osney, Osfrid, and Osmond, a trio of sellswords who get wrapped up in the intrigues of King's Landing. Initially recruited by Tyrion to monitor Cersei, they later changed sides to serve her instead. The brothers are central to several schemes, including Osney falsely confessing to having an affair with Marjorie in order to bring the faith of the Seven down on her, to Osmond actually having an affair with Cersei and being elevated to Kingsguard, which ironically brings the faith down on her. In the show, the name Kettleblack doesn't even occur, and these intrigues are mainly dealt with by Lancel Lannister.
Gods, what a stupid name.
As well as a character invented for the show called Olyvar, a spy in Littlefinger's employ. His affair with Loras replaces Osney's false confessions, and he plays a part in introducing everyone's favorite, Oberyn Martell.
I'm afraid I'm not on offer, my lord.
Everyone who works for Littlefinger is on offer. Take off your clothes.
In order for Robb Stark to communicate with the Lannisters in King's Landing, an emissary is sent back and forth carrying messages. In the book, this task falls upon Cleos, who has a Frey father and a Lannister mother. When the war breaks out, he chooses to fight for the Lannisters, which alienates him from the other half of his family who are sworn to the king in the north. In the show, however, Cleos Frey is replaced by Sir Alton Lannister, Jaime's distant cousin. While the dilemma of having two sides of your family on either side of the war is thrown out, this is compensated for by the invention of this beautiful anecdote.
I squired for you once, you know? I'll remember it all until I die. That was the best day of my life.
It's another great example of how to make us invested in a character on short notice.
And I remember being on the field after it was over, but I couldn't leave.
I also had to replace someone's squire on short notice. It's like stepping into a dream you've been dreaming for as long as you can remember and finding out that the dream is more real than your life.
Only to immediately snatch him away from us.
Starks are very careful.
There is a way, I think. You'll only have to do one thing.
Tell me.
You'll have to die.
Qarth is a beacon of decadence and sophistication, and nowhere near as fleshed out in the show as it is in the book. In Game of Thrones, the 13 is an elite council ruling the city.
We are the 13, charged with the governance and protection of Qarth, the greatest city that ever was or will be.
But in the book, the 13 merchant princes is just one of many factions. Apart from them, there's also the Guild of Spicers, the Pureborn, and the Tourmaline Brotherhood. So Xaro is just one of many merchants. The Spice King isn't even in the book, and Piatri and the Warlocks are not amongst these ruling classes. While Arya's time at Harrenhal is well depicted in the show, it's a lot more fleshed out in the books. There, she experiences the horrors of war, goes under different names, and suffers abuse from all kinds of middlemen and women. In the show, the first thing Arya has to go through is being put in a cage along with Gendry and Hot Pie, awaiting selection to be tortured for information until they die. This practice is ended by Tywin, who puts them all to work rather than to question.
Get these prisoners to work.
And Arya becomes his cupbearer.
Bring the girl. I need a new cupbearer.
This is one of the most appreciated changes amongst Game of Thrones fans, as it allows for a beautiful sneak peek behind enemy lines.
Perhaps we'd profit from some sleep.
Yes, I think you would, Reginald. And because you're my cousin, I might even let you wake from that sleep. If your name wasn't Lannister, you'd be scrubbing out pots in the cook's tent. Go!
Can you read?
Everyone?
I judged you might be good for something more than brutalizing peasants. See, I overestimated you.
As well as interesting tidbits like Jaime being dyslexic.
Could make sense of the letters. He reversed them in his head. I sat Jaime down for 4 hours every day until he learned. He hated me for it. For a time. For a long time. But he learned.
If you haven't fallen in love with Arya at this point already, you will now.
They say he can't be killed.
Do you believe them?
No, my lord. Anyone can be killed.
And, I mean, can anyone get enough of Charles Dance as Tywin? In the book, Tywin never interacts with Arya directly, and she becomes cupbearer to Roose Bolton when he takes over the castle. Now, Roose Bolton's eerie presence in the book is by no means bad. These scenes foreshadow the Boltons' betrayal. For example, Roose goes out hunting and comes back with a bunch of wolf pelts. We also meet Elmar Frey, who, being Roose Bolton's squire, interacts quite a bit with Arya. He's the lucky boy who got betrothed to a certain princess as part of King Robb's marriage alliance with the Freys.
And Arya will marry his son when they both come of age.
She won't be happy about that.
And upon receiving word that the marriage pact has fallen through, Elmar is devastated. The funny thing is that neither he nor Arya ever know that they've been betrothed this whole time. Arya thinks he's a wimp for crying over this and hopes that his stupid princess dies. Careful what you wish for. Most viewers will remember how Theon's torture at the hands of Ramsay broke him and transformed him into a whole different person.
You Reek. Reek! That's a good name for you.
Book readers, however, will also know that Theon is not the only Reek in the books, because there were 3. See, the original Reek was a Bolton man-at-arms known for his foul stench. No one could stand to be around him, and when Ramsay's mother came to the Dreadfort asking for an extra hand to help out at her farm, Roose gave her Reek as a cruel joke. However, Reek and Ramsay grew to be inseparable, and Reek's unquestioning loyalty came in handy when it came to, terrorizing people. They were basically the Robin Hood and Little John of hunting people down and raping them for sport. And so, after Ramsay kidnaps and forces Lady Hornwood of Hornwood to marry him, Sir Rodrik Cassel, the Castellan of Winterfell, goes to dispense justice. As the writers approach, Ramsay swaps clothes with Reek and smears himself in filth to pass as Reek. The real Reek is ridden down and killed, and Ramsay, who Rodrik believes is Reek, is taken back to Winterfell and thrown in a dungeon. Later, after Winterfell has been taken over by the Ironborn, Ramsay, posing as Reek, swears fealty to Theon and is particularly helpful in the hunt of Bran and Rickon after they escape. It's also his idea to kill the Miller's boys to make it seem like the Starks were found, whereas in the show, it's Dagmar's idea.
I'm looking at spending the rest of my life being treated like a fool and a eunuch by my own people. Ask yourself, is there anything I wouldn't do to stop that from happening?
And where the show sees the Miller's boys burned to avoid recognition, the book sees Ramsay flaying them in true Bolton fashion. And where the show has the Ironborn knock Theon out and surrender Winterfell to the surrounding Bolton forces, in the book, Sir Rodrik Cassel comes back victorious from Deepwood Motte to lay siege to Winterfell with some 2,000 men. Theon desperately prepares his 17 remaining Ironborn to hold the castle and sends Reek with a bag of silver as a last resort to acquire reinforcements. And guess what? He does. When 600 Bolton men arrive, Rodrik is relieved, but they turn on the Northmen, killing them all to Theon's great relief. Ramsay, no longer posing as Reek, is welcomed by the Ironborn, but the Boltons turn on them too, killing all 17 and torching the castle. Only Theon is left alive and brought back to the Dreadfort. In the show, Theon executes Rodrik upon taking Winterfell, and Ramsay only arrives later with his men to accept the Ironborn surrender. However, while a captive at the Dreadfort, the show does have Ramsay pose as an ally to Theon at first, making him think that he's being rescued, only to lead him right back to captivity, and the real horror begins. This change makes the whole thing a lot less complicated, and involves Theon more. While Theon's transformation into Reek is a pretty unsavory bit of business in the show, the book involves even more gruesome stuff, like flaying most of Theon's fingers until he begs to have them cut off, sleeping in a cell without food, having to eat live rats, and his body decaying beyond recognition.
Not Theon! Reek! Here! Reek! My name is Reek!
A scene that is nearly word for word adapted from the book to the show is from a Davos chapter where he smuggles Melissandre ashore to give birth to the Shadow Demon Assassin. The difference is that at this point, Renly has already been killed by another demon assassin, born off-screen, so to say. So, who is this second demon meant for? In the book, the Castellan of Storm's End, Courtney Penrose, is still loyal to Renly even after he's died, and most of the bannermen have flocked to Stannis. And after literally throwing his gauntlet and challenging Stannis to a one-on-one over control of Storm's End, Stannis clenches his jaw and declines, knowing that he's got a better trick up his sleeve. This extremely useful tactic tends to be criticized by show watchers as a little way too convenient. Like, why not use this over and over until their enemies are all dead? Well, in the books, the physical, emotional, and psychological tolls of producing these demons are explored at greater depth, with Stannis losing sleep, having nightmares of the demon's escapades, and constant exhaustion as a result of lending his life's force to create them.
Your fires burn low, my king.
After capturing Winterfell, Theon's conscience starts playing tricks on him and he gets paranoid. One night he dreams about the Winterfell feast from episode 1. Jolly enough at first, the room grows darker and suddenly Theon finds himself dining with the dead. Robert's guts are spilling out on the table while Ned is headless. On the benches below are the corpses of people Theon grew up around and the wildling he killed to rescue Bran. Lastly, Robb enters the hall, bleeding from 100 savage wounds, partly serving as symbolism of Theon's betrayal and partly as another foreshadowing of the Red Wedding.
Mother.
This dream is understandably left out of the show, and Theon's moral dilemmas are mainly portrayed through the interactions he has with Maester Luwin.
You're not the man you're pretending to be.
Oh, and the annoying hornblower is also added to the show.
And I will kill that man!
When capturing Ygritte, Jon is deeply conflicted about executing her, being a woman and all.
A girl.
And the fact that she yielded obliges Jon to take her captive. She also tempts him with an offer to join the Free Folk.
Mance would take you. I know he would.
In the book, Jon chooses to spare Ygritte's life and lets her go, following Ned Stark's example of the man who passes sentence should look into the condemned's eyes and see if they really deserve to die. The show diminishes this active choice by having Ygritte take advantage of a moment's hesitation and break free. While both versions ultimately lead to the same place, Book Jon's active display of mercy is an important character trait, one that might get lost when he is resurrected later. The book also sees Jon rejoin and have lengthy conversations with Qhorin about taking Ygritte up on the offer to infiltrate the wildlings, unlike the show where this happens on the fly.
They'll never trust me. They might, if you do what needs to be done. What?
In the show, Xaro Xoan Doxos is a man who went from sleeping by the docks to becoming the richest man in Qarth and vouched for Dany at the gates in order to gain her affections.
I will vouch for her, her people, and her dragons.
He offers her a share in his supposed riches, but that turns out to be a lie. And after he and Dorea steal her dragons and hook up, Daenerys locks them both in his empty vault. Which is all quite different from the books. See, Book Xaro is quite pale and slender. There's no vault, he never betrays Daenerys, and Dorea never made it to Qarth in the first place, having perished in the Red Waste. In fact, Xaro and Daenerys remain on friendly terms long after she leaves Qarth, and he even visits her when ruling in Meereen, warning her that the Pureborn and the 13 are plotting against her. While Daenerys' time spent in Qarth is often criticized as being slow and lacking agency, the show's decision to make Xaro's character more conclusive and to allow Daenerys some agency by sealing his fate was, all things considered,
wise move.
Just like in the show, Robb makes a pact with the Freys of the Crossing, promising to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, and just like in the show, he breaks it.
I don't want to marry the Frey girl.
I don't want you to marry her.
However, in the book, there is no exotic Lady Talisa from Volantis. Rather, it's the Lady Jane of House Westerling. Jane tends to Robb following a battle in the Westerlands, and, as young folks do, love happens. Feeling guilty over having slept with her, Book Robb marries Jane to preserve her honor, breaking his marriage pact with House Frey and setting off the chain of political consequences that lead to the Red Wedding.
The Lannisters send their regards.
As of Book 4, A Feast for Crows, Jane Westerling remains a captive of the Lannisters and has, on Tywin's instructions, been fed contraceptives to prevent any unwanted Stark heirs from cropping up. While some complain that changing Jane for Talisa is a tired old Hollywoodification, there's something to be said for us getting to experience Robb falling in love in order to relate to his choice to betray the Freys, as opposed to finding out after the fact like in the book. And just like with Xaro Xoan Doxos, making Talisa's arc more conclusive, by which I mean death, saves the trouble of having to deal with her again later when the narrative has long moved on. Chataya is an exotic woman from the Summer Isles who runs a high-end brothel in King's Landing. Her daughter, Alayaya, works there alongside her, which comes as a shock to Tyrion. But from Chataya, we learn that the art of lovemaking is something sacred where she comes from, and that prostitution is a way to worship the gods.
In the Summer Isles, they worship the fertility goddess with 16 teats.
We should sail there immediately.
Both the book and the show sees Tywin prohibit Tyrion from bringing Shae to King's Landing, and in the show he simply defies his father and keeps Shae in the Tower of the Hand.
No one can know you're here.
No one will know.
But in the book, Varys and Chataya assist Tyrion in sneaking into the brothel through a secret tunnel to meet with Shae, and without anyone finding out. With Alayaya as a decoy, anyone spying on him would think that he's just meeting with her.
Oh. One
of the benefits of television is that it's easy to invent scenes between supporting characters. Bronn and the Hound never have any dialogue together in the book, but that's all rectified in this memorable scene right before the Battle of the Blackwater.
I don't think he likes me. Your Lord Imp's going to miss you.
I expect he will someday.
This scene gives us a glimpse at the people actually about to go to war and fight and die. We also get to see these regular features in a different setting. No perfume lords, just medieval boys being boys, for better or worse. The Horn of Winter, also known as Joramun's Horn, is a powerful symbol of the Free Folk. It's tied to the myth of Joramun, a legendary king beyond the wall who used the horn to wake giants from the earth, and allegedly bring down the wall itself. In the books, Mance Rayder claims he has this horn and threatens to use it if the wildlings are not allowed to pass south. But that doesn't happen, and his bluff fails. As for the real Horn of Winter, if it even exists at all, we don't know. Many speculate that the horn is found by Jon and Ghost when unearthing the cache of dragonglass at the Fist of the First Men. In the show, this discovery is made by Sam and Gren, and the horn never comes into play. Questions remain whether it will ever appear in the books, but if it does, most likely it will be in connection to the White Walkers, who are in the market for just this sort of thing. Unless they can get their hands on a dragon, of course. So, what did you think of these changes? I read all the comments, so let's discuss it together. Sharing this video with someone who might enjoy it too helps me out a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in a video about book and season 3.